Hey everyone, welcome to the Dev Interrupted Continuous Improvement Watch Party. I'm your host and panel moderator, Dan Lyons, and I get the pleasure of introducing the new faces of continuous improvement. Charity Majors, the CTO and founder of Honeycomb.io. Dana Lawson, the VP of Engineering at GitHub. And Kathryn, Koehler, the Director of Productivity Engineering at Netflix. We are so excited to have you all back in the Dev Interrupted community. If you haven't already, definitely check out their episodes on the Dev Interrupted podcast. They are 3 of our most popular episodes, and they hit on today's topic, continuous improvement. So today's agenda, it's pretty straightforward. We'll be talking about creating continuous improvement in an engineering organization, broken up into 4 categories: workflow, data, culture, and leadership. All right, so let's dig right into our continuous improvement conversation, starting with workflow. And Charity, let's start this topic off with you. So you are a well-known advocate of continuous delivery, even taking it to the extreme by saying teams should have a 15-minute feedback cycle.
15-minute or bust, man. Absolutely.
15-minute or bust. Can you explain why dev teams should have such a short, feedback loop and how it helps engineering organizations continuously improve?
Yeah, it's like the cornerstone that great engineering teams are built on. If you have that rapid feedback loop, then you're able, you have that original intent. It's fresh in your head. You know exactly what you're trying to do and why, and all the trade-offs you had to make, and all the variable names and everything. And you can never get that back again. It starts to decay immediately as soon as you've switched your focus away from it. So there's that reason. There's also the fact that, if you elongate that, from 15 minutes to say hours or whatever, you're going to start batching up lots of people's changes and sending them all out together, which means you've severed the ownership cycle there. If your code is going out within 15 minutes or less, you're going to go look at it. If you know that your code and half a dozen to a dozen others might go out at some point in the next hour, day, or week, you're not going to go look at it, right? Like it just, and the longer it gets, the more this stuff snowballs, right? The longer the interval, the more time you spend waiting on people, the bigger the diffs get, the longer it takes to review them, the more coordination it takes, the more, now you're going to need like specialists to do your build and deploys, because every time a deploy fails, you have to just start doing git bisect to try and figure out whose fault it was. Then it ruins the rest of everyone's day who happened to ship something in that release, and now before you know it, you're a giant org that moves like a dinosaur. Like you can spend your life fighting all of the pathologies and the side effects and everything, or you can fix it at the source, 15 minutes or bust.
Yeah, long feedback cycles ruin people's days. That's my takeaway from that. And yeah,
let's not get too no, fuck it. Let's get very emotional about this. It ruins lives, ruins careers. It makes software engineering incompatible with, say, adulthood and parenthood. Engineering should be a creative, fulfilling activity. If you're on a high-performing team, you spend most of your time solving new and interesting puzzles that move the business forward every day. The longer that feedback loop is, the more you can't live up to that, and it just becomes a bunch of toil.
Well, definitely hard to disagree with that. So totally, for sure. Dana, do you know how long it takes someone at GitHub to release to production or anything around feedback loops?
I mean, I dream of the 15-minute cycle, if that tells you anything. The reality of it is we have huge major scale, and we are a polyglot environment, and there's some release paths that are like 15 minutes. You're like, yes, new hot stuff. I can get it in. I can see it. I can do it. The reality is we have a monolith still at GitHub for a good chunk of our code base. And so we have to do smart things to ensure that we get that 15-minute loop. So we're deploying continuously. We have continuous integration, as you can imagine. Depending on the different type of product that you're working on or where it splinters out, we have a huge ecosystem with different cloud providers. We also have our on-prem. It's a mismatch, as you can imagine, with this type of scale and tech we started. So we're always looking at those paid paths, though. And so we try to put that down to the team, the engineering team. So some teams, because of the way that they have been well, I don't want to say stuck, but yeah, they're kind of stuck. I'll use charity. They're kind of stuck having to write and deliver code on some of the pipelines. It's a slower cycle. So we've gotten smart about it. And so we have a size limit and we batch them up in what we call trains, deployment trains. Because you got to do it. And no, it's like, I mean, it's like the battle that I feel never end. I'm like, fuck trains. And I'm like, oh, you got to have fucking trains. And I'm like, no trains. But you have to like find what works for your systems and continuously improve it. Like you continuously deploy. Like
you got to meet people where they're at.
You got to meet people where they're at. You got to observe and bring and look back and say, okay, what friction is really happening there? And then also assess the risk of change, right? Like we have a whole system because we have to have some of these ways that we deploy within their trains where, you know, it does keep people up at night. So we have to limit the risk. It's like how many lines of code, how many changes, who's watching it? Are we following the sign? Is the train conductor, you know, healthy, able, and ready? Do they understand the changes? Are you writing good documentation? Because when you have a system where it's still a little brittle in some areas, you got to go find those points. So we're always deploying. We're always deploying. I took a peek and I was just like, oh my gosh, we've already deployed to production over 600 times and it's 1:48 Pacific today. And so I was like, it's always just jamming through. But we're not hardcore. We want to, you know, people go and they look at metrics and they're just like, okay, time to commit and cycle time. Like we all want it to be the standard box and bow. I'm like, when you get to a certain scale, like reality comes and sets in, you know, and you still should have, you know, goals that meet and satisfy really the friction, right? It's all about the developer experience at the end of the day. How are you making their lives better? And so they don't have to bird dog production because they're like, oh shit, my code's going in 5 hours. Like they have people have life. So long way of saying it varies. It varies.
Yeah. Every team is different, and you know, meeting each team where they're at, that totally makes sense to me. I know, for example, at Netflix, there's also a very high deployment frequency. I don't know how many times at Netflix you've released today, but I do know, Kathryn, that your team focuses on continuous improvement of workflows using a paved path methodology. Can you explain what that means and why it's effective?
Yeah, I love that, you know, Charity and Dana have brought up paved path or paved road. I prefer paved path because I like alliteration. And this is a metaphor that we use to describe sort of the way that we build products and services so that we can manage software through development, delivery, and operations or observability and insights. And so our whole goal with the paved path is to maximize developer efficiency. Can we build out curated components? Can we build out end-to-end experiences? Can we get people onto this super highway that lets them move away from all of the different Netflixisms and everything that's under the hood? I'm just going to kill this car metaphor until it's like dead. So, you know, we have a couple of components of paved path. Simplifying so people can focus on their domain, right? Not on our domain. Trusting the experts. You know, we have UI developers, we have backend service developers. We want them to focus on what they know, and we take all that stuff away from them. We want to simplify. So, you know, curation, intents, any sort of thing that we can bake in for that 85% case so that people don't have to just be so intimately knowledgeable about all of this stuff. Accelerating, automating everything that you can. Anytime somebody does something over again and we could have automated, shame on us, right? That's bananas. And also empowering and delighting. Let's not forget about delight, right? Productivity tooling is pretty amazing. And if someone can get in there and do their job and do their job well, they're going to feel pretty psyched about that and really satisfied. And when you're productive, you're satisfied, right?
Yeah, engineers don't get burned out by shipping too much. They get burned out by not shipping.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, we really want to provide the world's best software experience for our developers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually wondering, Dana, because you have also like probably a pretty large organization. How does it work for GitHub? Is it like anyone can use any open source software they want, or tooling, or are there
Wild West.
or is there guidelines?
I mean, we come from open source. It's our bread and butter. Like, you got to put out what the community's talking about. You got to use the tools. I mean, it's a balance. I think you have to make that decision, build versus buy versus utilize what's out there. And you're constantly like this, waltz with those options. You're like, maybe this one we buy something somebody else made. Maybe we utilize something the community built. Maybe we build it ourselves. But I think it comes down to just ensuring that you have high levels of security within your development tool chain, right? Like that, for me, I think there's a world when you do have to have consistency, right, on the main pieces. But as far as the job that needs to be done, we want to ensure we're embracing that innovation, but we want to do it in a way with intentionality, right? So no, we're not going to go to Hacker News and probably, use the new latest cool crypto mining tool. I don't know, maybe we will to go build some software, and everybody seems to be on that jam. But no, I mean, I think there's a level of constraints you want to have when you have key components so you can manage a scalable architecture, but you don't want to be too stringent. I look at it as guardrails versus do not pass go, right? There's flexibility within the system.
Well, there's two things here. Number one, there's a spectrum of risk. The closer you get to laying bits down on disk, the riskier it is. If anybody goes out and just spins up their own fucking database, I'm sorry, no. But over on the other end of the spectrum is developer tools. Hell yeah, play around with that stuff. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. I also feel as a company grows and scales up, I think that it's good to have a very loose, liberal, use what's best for you, make locally, local maximum decisions, etc., everything. But then you do reach a point where that becomes ungovernable, and which is when I think that you need to think of it as having a golden path, right? Here is what we decide to support as an org. If you have an SRE team, they will support if you're using MySQL, if you're using, Chef, if you're using, here's all the stuff that we know how to monitor, that we will give you stuff for free. It will be a nice paved path, it'll be very easy because all this stuff will be run for you. And if you choose to deviate from this path, you can do that, but it's on you to support it. And here's what our standards are for that, which makes people think very hard about whether or not they want to do that, which they should. It should be their decision, but there should be they should have some skin in the game.
Exactly. Right. And I think that's where you go and you incentivize hey, and you don't want to incentivize just because you want somebody to use the paved path. You're doing it because the paved path is the easiest. You've taken the hard work. You've had the experts come in. They're trying to meet the mass of many. And so it's ensuring, right, where the risk level of what you're going to go and design, right? You don't want to have 15 different type of SQL databases. There's some. You don't want
some asshole coming in and going, well, I know Red Hat better. So even though we have Debian, I'm going to use Red Hat. Come on. What is you should be getting an order of magnitude better performance, or there should be a significant boost,
And sometimes people go off the paved path and they start forging and pioneering. And like you said, they're responsible for owning it, but sometimes that's great innovation and we can bring that in centrally. If we have a partnership, let's work from a place where if you go off the paved path, it's a deliberate decision. You're going to come back and work with us so that we can pave it. Right.
Yeah, there has to be a process for maintaining the golden path, right? And which is why I wrote a whole blog post about this at one point, because what I've seen work well is you have a council, 3 to 5 people, and maybe you rotate them out, every quarter or so that there's just kind of a constant, and they meet, and anytime somebody wants to add something to the golden path, it gets discussed, and because there has to be flex in the system or people are just going to go rogue.
Yep.
Perfect. I'm going to move us on to our second topic, which is data. So in my world at Linear B, data is one of the core things for continuous improvement. For example, if you have, let's say, no idea what your cycle time is, sometimes it's really hard to know if you're improving or not improving or where the bottlenecks are. So Kathryn, I know your team at Netflix is currently setting up an engineering metrics program, and you've been using Nicole Forgson's new space methodology. Can you talk to us about what that is and how you're using it?
Yeah, space is early days, right? I think the article got published in early March, and luckily that lined up pretty well with when we were coming up with our productivity strategy. And one thing we don't have is metrics. We don't have a view into cycle time. We don't have a view into the very fundamentals. So we're going on a lot of gut feel, like we think this will do a good job and we think this will help out people, but oversimplifying, but for effect. And space coming out at this point in time, and I'm a fangirl of Nicole's as well, like just really, really cool. For us, there is no unicorn metric. There's no unicorn metric for anybody. People who are at sort of the undergraduate level of productivity measure activity, and they think, oh, lines of code, butts and seats, deployment a day, like all these things. That's what you can get your head around, and that's what productivity means. But Nicole's take on it is really around well-being and satisfaction, right? And so for the acronym, for the interested reader, it's satisfaction and well-being, performance, activity, communication, collaboration, and efficiency and flow. And what's great for a productivity team is you can use this as a proxy for your customer. And so if they're performing well on these metrics and your whole role is to make them more productive, you can use how they're doing in these areas as a proxy for how well your teams are doing. And so, surveys, CSAT, customer satisfaction, happy face, how are you doing? Really understanding that, performance, like DORA, quality, bugs, it all goes together into this really nice, healthy matrix to evaluate customer productivity. And so that's how we're using it. We are early days. We are like, we've read it, we've talked about it, we're going to start implementing. And I think the first thing we're going to implement is like time to ... right? Like how long does it take to build, to test, to do these things? And we're just going to keep plugging it in and keep measuring over time and then seeing if the things that we're pushing out are really impacting and making the changes we want to see.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, Nicole is awesome, of course, and she's also the author of a pretty famous book now, Accelerate, and that kind of more
Basically
so
the
kind
Bible.
of the Bible of the 4 DORA metrics.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, Dana, since you work at GitHub with Nicole, like maybe you could introduce us to those 4 DORA metrics, or maybe say, how are you using them for continuous improvement?
I mean, first of all, Nicole's freaking awesome. And if she hears this, love you, girl. She's amazing. Like I probably annoy the shit out of her on Slack because like this comes to mind and I'm like probably taking advantage of the ability that we work together, but I'm always asking these questions. And Dora, I feel like if you haven't heard of it before, it's deployment frequency, like how many times you're pushing to production, your cycle time, like commit into production. So like when you start writing code and you commit it and then you go and push it, deep deployment failure or change failure, where you break production because you deploy something. And then mean time to recovery. It's like how fast, I don't like to say how long, how fast are you gonna get these systems back up? How are you gonna think about delighting the customers? And it shouldn't always be how fast. And so the way that we look at it, and talking about with Nicole, it's like these are a good foundation to start really understanding your organization. Like with any analytics, it's a trap just to look at activity. It's a trap just to go read these in a vacuum, right? It's not going to tell you the whole picture of what's going on. There's so many different variables, and the variables are going to probably be unique to that team that's actually working. Because you can have a company like the scale like GitHub and Netflix and Honeycomb, and you have all these little units, and your data engineers may have a different cycle time, and that's totally freaking fine.
Accelerate is the first time that we've had sort of a baseline to start agreeing on and converging on.
And then building.
And I would add a fifth, which is how often your teams get alerted outside of business hours.
Yeah.
But I feel like you could do a whole lot worse than to just have every engineering manager just make sure that they're watching those 5 metrics, and things will tend to towards the right direction.
I think so too. Use it as a baseline and then build upon what matters most.
Don't like grade people on it, but make sure they're aware of it.
I think it's important. You have to measure it. Like if you're not measuring it, then like, what do you know? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to verify your heart with your mind.
Unfortunately, what gets graded gets gamified. And so it's super important to reinforce with people, this is a tool for you to know where you're investing and how you're improving. I am not looking at it to adjust your comp.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe at the end of the day, maybe, but
I don't know. I think focusing though there on that though, why do I feel like this new metric meaning of space is important? Because it's like, why do we care about Dora? Because there's humans that are alive doing this activity. And like, we're asking a good chunk of their consciousness to enable the world through the things that we build.
A pretty fair proxy for how painful is this to administer and to maintain.
Yeah, you better believe it. I want them to be good and feel fulfilled and be happy. And I think getting in the flow is so incredibly important. Like the studies show, right? UC Irvine and Humboldt in Germany said that it takes 23 minutes from every distraction from when you're like in the zone to get back in the zone, whether it's your, like my dog sitting at my office door right now staring, right? And everybody's different, right? I mean, you think of like the variance in humans, like in their attention spans, but on average, so I think that it goes hand in hand when you talk about like, how do we measure success? What is the team producing? Because you'll see quality go up when people have the space and a frictionless way to ship their code.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is kind of a way to produce some healthy tension between, what people are naturally tracking is just how often are my features going out, right? They're tracking that. Product people are tracking that. And so they're applying pressure from that direction. And historically, there just hasn't been the corresponding, pressure from the direction of, okay, but the people who are writing and maintaining this system, what's their lives like? And what percentage of their time do they get to spend moving the business forward versus just, in the trenches, like doing drudgery?
Yeah, fighting migrations, fighting security updates, patching, all of the things that we
turtles all the way down.
You can take away, yeah.
Charity, you mentioned a really good fifth one, I think, to reiterate. So is that how many interrupts are happening from my team from production, or could you talk about that a little bit?
I think that there's a huge difference between interrupts during work hours when you expect them, right? And you need to have reasonable policies and direct them to one person at a time, et cetera. But right. That doesn't really drain your life force the way being pinged outside of work hours does. Like that spends you real fast, and I believe that every engineer out there who works on a 24/7 highly available service should be on call for that in some form or another. I think it's reasonable to ask any engineer to be woken up once or twice a year for the stuff that they build and support, right? More than that, and that's just kind of abusive.
Yeah.
You can only do that when you're 25 and you grow out of it. So,
yeah.
But I think that's a handshake, right? That's the deal that we make. We ask engineers to be on call. It's management's duty to make sure that it doesn't suck.
Yeah.
And I think when it's happening unexpectedly, like too many times, then you're going to be in kind of that retention situation of like, I'm a developer. I just don't want to do this anymore. Like I can't, it's not fun.
For the stuff that they've built, by default, we care about what we've built. Like we want to make sure it's going well. But that instinct of ours can get ground down over time if it's like constantly, if it's like night after night and it's like week after week, like you just it drains your life force and your will to live. And you should move on. If nobody is respecting your time and your sleep, then you should leave.
Yeah. You can only bend that bar so many times before it breaks.
Yep.
Right.
And I'm just going to add right now, I think, most of the world, and not that I'm like, speaking on behalf of the world. I don't know. Maybe I could be Miss World, Dana.
Go right? For it, Dana.
Universal burnout. Like we are over this. We're over shit. Like it's funny. Well, it's not funny. That's not the right word. But, I have people that aren't in this industry and, it's been unfortunate to see how they've been affected. And then us in technology, like I feel like my work has done nothing but increase since I've been at home. Because like the lines and we're remote first are just so blurry. So I think you have to really take in effect this, like, like this time and space that we've never, most of us, I mean, unless our great grandparents experienced it and they're still alive, a global crisis like the ones that we're having right now. And so this adaptation into like this new cycle of work.
At the same time, it is not evenly distributed. Like parents are going through so much.
Oh my gosh, the parents. Oh,
yeah. We're languishing. We're all languishing right now.
Everything's relative. Like anytime somebody asks me how I am, it's like, how do I answer this? Because on the one hand, I don't have kids. I didn't lose my job. I'm doing pretty much as well as anyone can. At the same time, everything fucking sucks.
Hanging in there. Yeah.
Still here.
And so I think we have to be even more mindful of giving that space. Mean time between interruption, like that should be the measurement. Like, we already know people have blurred lines on their work when they're technologists for the most part. Like, we should do our duty to not stress them out even more, because like everybody's stressed.
There's a lot of attention that goes to like, supporting people when they ask for time off and all this stuff. But I feel like we need to go a little bit farther than that and push people to take time off and like keep track of like, how long has it been since you took more than 2 contiguous days off?
Yeah.
It's been more than 6 months. Well, then you've got 2 months to figure it out, honey, because I'm going to lock you out of the system. We need to push it, because a lot of people, they feel so much loyalty to their teams, to the company, to the product, that they will, without fully realizing it, they'll work themselves down into a place where they're desensitized. And like, we've all been in that place, right? Where you're no longer making good choices for yourself, right?
We have coordinated time off. I gave my team like coordinated first Friday so that you don't have to worry about letting your peers down. But we also need to make sure that our shit works so that people feel like they can leave, that they can't walk away.
Every single month that doesn't have a 3-day weekend, we make one up just so that everyone gets to take the day off on their own.
Yeah.
Yep. And like that comes back down to measurement, right? Like, adjust expectations. If you have out of the box standard measurements and you're having a more flexible work time, your cycle time should be different. You shouldn't have surprises where they're like, whoa, what is this dip? It's like, yeah, that's an intentional dip. And this is now the new median. So congratulations.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good lead in actually to our third topic, which is culture. Even down to the way that you encourage time off, that's probably good culture. And I don't, usually like saying something so like a blanket statement like this, but if you really want to continuously improve, I think it's tough to do that if you have a rotten engineering culture. And so I'm going to move it to Dana. When you were on the podcast, we talked a lot about trust and positivity. How does trust and positivity play into a continuous improvement culture in your mind?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, like, developers don't want to hear lip service that you're going to make it better for them. You have to do that. And like, so as you start making improvements and you start bringing out the friction and you show commitment to that, and you're not just pumping it out and burning out people, you're going to develop some trust. But I think it's a bi-directional highway. And right now it's like, how do we make decisions? How do we improve the system? I think you have to stop, look, and listen, and just really, and where positivity comes from that is like, I truly believe that anything is possible. Like, I think we have momentary moments where shit is terrible. And like, but for me, I always am like, and it's just my personality, I'm like, okay, that's terrible. Like, how are we gonna make it better? Like, I wouldn't have that moment. And I don't want to be like this I'd never be disingenuous about your excitement, right? Like, I'm just this person naturally that's just like, okay, this was the most terrible thing ever. I have bad moments. People be like, do you have bad days? I have bad days. But then I get to see the opportunities that we have. And like, I get grounded in my work because I love thinking about how to make people's lives better. That's all we're doing as leaders. How do we get to help make people's lives better? Because I could come back to it. They're showing up, giving a huge chunk to us. Like, I just feel so grateful and so honored for the people that work at GitHub and the people in my life that are giving me space and time to be with them. So I take it upon me to say, like, how can we make this experience awesome? Like, the world is completely unpredictable in some facets right now. How can at work be predictable? How can we have them show up and just say, like, I got to go and create and innovate and be excited about that? And I have a rule, like, when I'm in a total shitty attitude and mood, like, I don't show up. I will cancel meetings. I will say, you know what? I'm having a moment. Because if I come in and I'm having a bad day, that will color me unconsciously or sometimes consciously to make decisions maybe I wouldn't have if I wasn't like so down in the dumps. And I think it comes down to, like, as a leader, when you're having those moments, be authentic, be vulnerable, be like, I'm having a moment. And here's how I'm going to go get myself out of that moment and show that it almost like it's not a negative thing to not be okay. It's a positive thing to be not okay and to share that and then talk about how we can make it better. But the trust comes from, you better make it better. Like if you're going to ask for people to exhibit vulnerability and not have anything, now it's like, then you're just driving more anxiety. Like I've been there myself. It's like, oh shit, like was I overly vulnerable? Is it a confidence hit? And so it's this balance. And I think a big part of it is how you show up. We as leaders sometimes don't realize the invisible influence we have, because what do they say? Like, the worst person on your management team, that's the person that everybody thinks like that's the baseline for what people are going to do, right? That's like what they're going to do. And so I think we always have to push ourselves to say, are we creating the environment? And one of my things, like, be kind to your future self. Do the things right now that are going to help make you be better. And then also turn in effect and say, like, how are you doing this with the people? Because at the end of the day, all of these systems we're talking about are how to make people's lives fulfilled. Like you get fulfillment out of building, making, and going to work, because that's how the world works in a lot of places. How do you play a part in it?
Amen.
Amazing. Yeah, very, very well said. Now, Charity, your company, from what I remember, is scaling right now, or was scaling like pretty rapidly. And so like many of our listeners are in a similar situation. What do you do to keep the culture strong and focus on improvement while having to onboard new engineers?
What do we do to keep the culture strong? Well, like engineering culture or just culture in general?
Yeah, either.
Well, so one interesting thing that has come up recently is one of the teams has started having stand-ups that for an hour a day, 5 days a week. And the engineering manager was like, I really had to get over my knee-jerk, it's 10 minutes, get in, get out, etc. But he said for this team, like it's because they're all distributed, lots of them haven't ever met each other. He's like, it's actually really high bandwidth and it's really bonding. Like it's a mix of like human stuff and joking around, but also like doing like deep dives into stuff and like, sorting, prioritizing, doing tickets and stuff and, doing knowledge transfer. And, it's a small, like 4 or 5 person team, but they're loving it. And I can see, I can see the energy in this team and how quickly they're moving and just the smiles on their face. And like, that's really working for them. Wouldn't have guessed that, but great.
Yeah,
so,
actually that's awesome because that's a trust thing. The engineering Bible says 15-minute stand-ups, but I'm going to bring an idea to the group 1 hour, which I know was used to be looked upon as maybe crazy, but now that might be the best thing.
It just kind of naturally just kept growing. And so they finally just kind of acknowledged it to each other. They're like, yeah, no, we're actually going to invest this time because it's really working for us.
Like a working happy hour.
I feel like, there's a pretty strong thread of honeycomb culture. What was concerning me there for a little while was that, new people would join and they would feel very much like a part of honeycomb, but they weren't feeling that tight team bonding around themselves, because we doubled the size of the engineering engineering org really quickly. Wow. And nobody's been able to meet in person. And there's just like, how do you kind of replicate that? So we've been doing some interesting stuff. Like we had a magic show for all of the kids of Honeycomb employees. And that was just fun to watch all the stupid little faces, just like giggling and stuff. And, I'm so fatigued on Zoom, just like, oh my God. But it was really sweet. So I think there's a couple different levels there. There's the, making space for people to bond with their immediate teams. We've had there was one, a couple of the engineers are Canadians, and when a new engineering manager joined, they created a Canadian Jeopardy for the team to play together, which is pretty funny. I think that it's got to, you have to have your finger on the pulse, because it can't be too top down. It also can't be too bottom up. There's got to be room to just sort of like riff on things that come up, and it has to be unique. It has to be organic and, and natural to each team. So like, none of our three, engineering orgs is really alike in the way that they've chosen to address this, but they're all kind of getting there. We do have some policies, like every single person is on call, right? That's a thing that we share. So we have a thing where, if once you join, you get the presentation, here's our infrastructure, et cetera. And then it's going to be your job to give that presentation to the next person who joined, and you are getting it from the last person who joined. So it's like this chain, which is kind of funny. It's a little shared stress, everyone freaks out a little, but it's okay, stuff like that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing with us. And, finally, Netflix is well known for their engineering culture. I know you all have a nice and big manifesto about it that I think a lot of people have read. So for those people who haven't read it, Kathryn, could you tell us what makes Netflix engineering culture so unique and why it works so well for continuous improvement?
Yeah, the Netflix culture is famous or infamous, depending on your point of view. In full disclosure, I ran to that culture. I read the memo and I was just like, oh man, this is a group that can move mountains, right? They basically treat people like adults. There are no rules. There are very few rules. There are a couple of rules. There are basically no rules, no policies. We really encourage context, not control, loosely coupled, highly aligned, freedom and responsibility, no vacation policy, just we trust you. We hire very well. And if you are an average performer, you get a real nice severance package, right? And so we try to build it up like a professional dream team. It's not a family. It is a group of people who are coming together to do a lot of work, solve a lot of problems.
I really don't like the F word getting attached to work. It's very disingenuous, I think.
Yeah, and it muddies the waters big time, right?
It's not okay.
And what we've been able to build is a lot of independent decision making, right? Just tremendous amount of transparency. When you create a Google Doc, you don't think about who to share it with. You just share it with everybody. And then you have people who are in there engaging with the content, pushing down decisions to the level that they should be made, because you are just really assimilating for your teams and providing that context and just trusting folks to do the right thing. And always the right thing is do it for Netflix. Don't do it for your boss. Don't do it just do it for Netflix. And what's come out of it is a big, nimble company that still behaves like a startup when they have new initiatives that they need to get going. And so that is all of the things that move into continuous improvement, right? We're not hog tying anybody by like hierarchies. Oh, I got to get approval for this thing. And then I'll go over here and I got to get this for the contract and I can only spend this much money. So, and that just really hampers innovation, and it hampers the responsibility that people feel when you give them that much freedom.
What do we all want from our work? We want autonomy, mastery, and meaning, right?
Yep, absolutely. And what's so interesting about the Netflix culture, and you hear about other company cultures, and you hear about other company values, and you see shit stenciled on a stairwell. But then you're like, that doesn't actually, that we don't do that. We
believe in excellence and success and giving it our all.
Better together. And and then you get in there and it's just a shit show. And you're like, wait a second, that's got nothing to do with what? Hey, and Netflix, like the first day I started, I counted 8. Well, that's freedom and responsibility coming out of somebody else's mouth. And I'm like, whoa, this is real. This is real. And it really works well for a software company. It really works well for a company that's being innovative. And I hate to overuse the word disruptive in a particular space. Like, we're taking down media titans, right? Because we have hired and we are living this way every day. It's pretty awesome. It has its flaws, right? Like nothing's perfect. Nothing's perfect. Sometimes it's more freedom, less responsibility. Like, you don't really think through the full life cycle of like, hey, I'm not going to go pave path. I'm going to go build this thing. But they don't really understand the responsibility of owning it after that point in time. So, there's some things, but man, it is pretty awe-inspiring.
Everything's a trade-off.
Yeah. Willing to make it.
Yeah, pick the one that's not going to hurt the most, and then learn when it does hurt and go like, okay, yeah, it was a little painful. I mean, I love that. I mean, we do the same thing. It's like, you want a high performing culture that feels that autonomy, that feels that they can make change, because it just seeps into everything else. But do it in a way where it's explicit and intentional.
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty great. And plug for No Rules Rules. Reed wrote that book with partnered with somebody else. It's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting deep dive into how the Netflix culture evolved and where we are now. Plug.
Yeah, well, it makes me think, and it kind of leads to our final topic. Some of or maybe one of the reasons why you might find kind of empty words written in stairwells, but then you get into that company and it's like, oh, there's, the root essence of this is really missing, can be due to leadership. So leadership is our final topic. As engineering leaders, it's kind of our job to set the tone, or maybe a good example, something to enable continuous improvement to happen. Charity, you write a ton of candid content about leadership on your blog, charity.wtf. Awesome blog. Everyone go check that out. In your mind, what is the role of engineering leadership, and how can they best enable continuous improvement?
Leadership or management?
Touche.
So I'm firmly of the opinion that those are not synonyms, right? You do need managers to be leaders, but you don't want them to be the only leaders. And in fact, when it comes to making technical decisions, you don't want them making most technical decisions, right? Which doesn't mean that they shouldn't be good at technology, because they need to have instincts about when to step in and when to nudge and how to guide and everything. That takes a lot of knowledge. But at the end of the day, if they're the ones making the decisions, you've got something pretty wrong. So like ideally, your engineers would have the autonomy and the ability to push back on, and say like, hey, we're spending all of our time doing feature stuff. Look at all of this time and money we are wasting, with our inefficient CI/CD pipeline. And, sometimes you do have, I think a role for management here is often to be that translators, right? If engineers are like, we need to like cut the build times, blah, 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 and the business folks are hearing, wah, 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 wah. Well, then engineering managers can often translate and go, well, yes, like I've done some back of the envelope math, and like if you take X number of engineers is what it takes to build and maintain a system in 15 minutes or less deploys. You need twice as many engineers if it's hours long. You need twice as many again if it's days long, right? Like you get into real serious math, but like often engineers aren't good at making that case for why the feature train should stop and we should invest in our own internal, but like these are socio-technical systems, right? People's ability to ship swiftly and safely it's like 2%, is like 20% their own knowledge of algorithms and data structures. It's like 80% the socio-technical system that surrounds them, right? The build systems, the deploy stuff, the processes around getting code out. Like somebody joins your company and their ability to ship code is going to rise or fall to the level that your socio-technical system supports. It kind of doesn't matter how good they are at their job, right? And so I do feel like if technical leadership has one job, it is to tend to that socio-technical system so that most people can spend most of their time moving the business forward, not struggling in toil, like just paying really close attention to those feedback loops and making them tight, investing in the work where it makes sense, not just trying to fix everything and make it perfect, but like look for where you can get those really big wins, and just setting, not having to reinvent the wheel. Like let's learn from people who have gone before us. Read Accelerate, right? Turns out this matters. Like we have the benefit of knowing all this science that even just 5-10 years ago they didn't have. There was a lot of I think, and I worked at, it was a very cargo culty, and it was very osmosis, and if you had been lucky enough to work with one of the best engineers in the world, then you kind of knew this stuff, but it was all just contagious, right? Now we have this freely available data, and we should be using it.
Very well said. Absolutely. Kathryn, I want to talk to you about coaching. So, sometimes if an organization is going to improve, you do have to enable others to make improvements as well. Can you talk about one or two topics you tend to do when coaching younger managers that helps them improve or improve the organization?
Yeah, for my younger managers and even for my more seasoned managers, I put a pretty big emphasis on staffing the team with exceptional diverse candidates, right? Bringing a wealth of experience and backgrounds and ethnographic, gender diversity, everything. So important to staff up that way so that we have a lot of voices at the table. We're thinking through situations. We're not just building in a monoculture, and we're not, like bringing in accessibility, bringing in, openness and accessible design and ease of use. And, how do people work? How do we work around a more distributed workforce? I mean, all of these things, like if you don't have these competing opinions at the table, like how good are you, right? Have your team look like your customer base and think like your customer base. And what's really important with that is also once you have people in the building, how do you lead with empathy, right? How do you be inclusive? How do you create that environment of trust and mutual respect that Dana spoke to earlier? I think that's just so important, especially people need to be customer obsessed in our roles. So how do you empathize with the customer position and not just sort of despise them for always coming to you with problems, but seeing it as like, oh my gosh, we're creating all these problems for these people. How do we go and solve them? And then I heard something really interesting from Michael Lopp many years ago, which resonated with me, which has always stuck with me. And you were put into a position of management because you're really good at something, or people wanted to move the problem. Let's assume A, right? Assume that you were put into management because you're really good at something. And it's not your job anymore to do the thing that you were really good at. It is your job to take the people that you are managing and mentoring and coaching and to coach them from a C to an A, right? And you're not going to help them by elbowing out of the way, like, no, I got this. Let me do it.
They call it 10X engineer.
Yes, 10X engineering. The big lie about 10X engineering is it's not one person. It's a person who can multiply these behaviors in other people, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, there's that one person that can go lock themselves in a room and develop an entire backend in an afternoon, but that we're not talking about that part. That's not reality. That's media. So yeah, your job is to really scale and work yourself out of a job. If you are successful, if you could just be like, you know what, you guys got this because I taught you the things and I added to your skill set the things that got me into this position. And so now you guys can go forward, and you gals and guys and everybody can go forward and disseminate this with the people that you are managing and leading on your teams.
This entire industry is still very much one of apprenticeship.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Nobody graduates from school. I'm a dropout, so clearly, but like nobody graduates from college like knowing what they need to succeed in this industry. You learn it from each other.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. So yeah, it's incumbent on you as a manager not to do that A-level work anymore, but coach your team from a C to an A. Yeah.
Great advice. I love it. Dana, you've already talked about this a little bit on the panel here today, but I did want to bring it back to you and talk about setting the tone as a leader. You have talked about trust and being vulnerable. When you were on the podcast, you and we had this incredible conversation about being positive, allowing people to get into flow, that type of stuff. Why is it so important for the leader to kind of set the tone? And how does a positive attitude perpetrate continuous improvement?
I don't know. I think you just have, if your job is to really align people, motivate, and understand the friction points, like you really have to walk in their shoes and you have to find the outcomes that fix those problems. And as a leader, if you show up and you're a major asshole, you're going to give that opportunity to the people around you to act like an asshole too, because you're at the top and you're acting that way. And at the end of the day, nobody wants to do that. I've worked for some terrible people. I don't even like to call people terrible. They had they didn't have great skills. That's mean. I'm not a mean person. They had terrible skills, but they were in a position of leadership. And it's just like, wow, you're writing people blank checks to be kind of like not awesome to be around. And like, that's like, nobody wants to be around that. I ain't got time for that. I come back to like Kathryn, hire adults, treat treat people with respect. You don't know their background. You don't know who they are. Come in with giving people the benefit of the doubt. I'm one of those people, not everybody's cool with this, is like, you don't got to earn my trust. Like, I trust you. We work together. Like, we're going to do some amazing shit together. Like, you have to break my trust by, like, you know, not doing the right thing. But I feel like when you sign up for this mission, whether you're like super into it or just like super into like making your career awesome, we have a responsibility of leaders. And I want people to come in and feel like this was worth their time. And that should come with this stroke of positivity, because what we know now, right? When you're in the zone, you're happy. When you're flowing, when you're creating, when you're making, most of us developers, that's what we do. And even like developer, DevOps, doesn't matter. You're fixing problems, creating things, and helping enable humans. And if we keep our eye on that, then don't we want to do it to make it better for everybody? And that's a positive thing. There's enough terrible things out there. There's enough terrible ways to do that. And I do feel like it's our job to set that tone, like, yes, it's possible. And here's how we're going to do it. And that doesn't mean every day is like, get up and smell the roses. I can't believe I'm so lucky to work here. No. It's like, wow, I feel like this is hard work, because most people like to work really hard. I love fucking working hard. I love it. Like, I get so antsy when I don't have a lot of stuff going on. And I think we surround ourselves with people of that caliber of excellence. You know, I just think about some of the things these two amazing people have said today, right? Like, you want to raise that bar, you want to have an exceptional team. And when you have that, like, how do you foster that? And you foster that through shared learning, shared wins, responsibility, behaving and acting like an adult, and knowing that it's just a job. And it doesn't really matter.
Nobody wants to work with Susie Cranky Pants.
Doesn't really matter.
Doesn't really matter.
It doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And that sounds
We're
crazy,
all going
right?
to die.
You're all going to die, and it doesn't matter. What matters is your experiences.
The universe will come for us all.
What matters is these experiences that we're having now. And I ask myself every day, am I being a vector of joy? Because that's what matters. And Maya Angelou said it best. It doesn't matter what you say, it's how you made them feel. All need to do that as leaders.
Perfect. I want to end on that. Perfectly said. You three are amazing people. And just thank you so much for coming on the panel today and sharing all of your experience and knowledge with us. Amazing stuff. Also, of course, a shout out to all of our watch party listeners. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Lines. I'm the COO and co-founder of Linear B. Our tool helps teams like yours continuously improve by providing the data, the context, and automation within your software delivery lifecycle. The tool is free for dev teams, so check it out at linearb.io. And until next time, see you all on the podcast. And thank you again to our three amazing guests.